I think it's safe to assume that many of us experience negative emotions. And of course, every person is different when it comes to how they manage negative emotions, but ultimately, all of us experience negative emotions, whether it's fear, jealousy, guilt, resentment, frustration, anxiety. We have all these negative emotions that we experience more often than not on a daily basis. And it's this sort of battle, this internal resistance that we face when it comes to dealing with our emotions, whether it's the more positive or, of course, negative emotions. It's this sort of internal resistance that all of us face in trying to overcome our self limiting beliefs and try to live better lives. But of course, our negative emotions can really hold us back. And it's these self limiting beliefs that can really warp our perception about ourselves and the world around us and can really limit us from utilizing our true potential to improve our lives for the better. And ultimately, these negative emotions that we all experience are part of this deeper psyche or this deeper part of our personality that is really part of the unconscious or what can be called the shadow or this darker side of our personality. And there's a term called the collective unconscious. And this is something that Carl Jung has coined in describing the shadow, where all of us, all human beings, have these negative emotions or this darker part of our personality that really is something that we can't ignore. And by actually ignoring this more negative part of our personality, we actually risk uh, really encouraging these negative behaviors that can really hurt our way of life and can hurt our families and friends and can really put us in a position where we can really just live very poor, unfulfilled lives and because we let these negative emotions get the best of us. So, in describing the shadow, as Carl Jung says, he says that unfortunately there can be no doubt that man is, on the whole, less good than he imagines himself or wants to be. Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. If an inferiority is conscious, one always has a chance to correct it. Furthermore, it is constantly in contact with other interests so that it is continually subjected to modifications. But if it is repressed and isolated from consciousness, it never gets corrected. So, as Jung is saying here, we all have this dark side. All human beings, everybody has it. I don't care how happy someone may appear to be, all of us have this deeper dark side or this shadow. And by ignoring the shadow or becoming afraid of it and ignoring it and repressing these negative emotions, we actually give these negative emotions more energy and power. And that's why it becomes very difficult for us to change. And that's why it's so hard for so many people, even by reading so many books on personal growth and seeing coaches and psychologists, they have such a hard time overcoming these limitations and trying to live happier, healthier lives because they become afraid of this shadow and these negative emotions whenever they experience these negative emotions. And the point is here that by ignoring the shadow, we actually give it more energy and actually it makes it much more difficult to overcome these self-limiting beliefs and these negative emotions. So really for many of us, by repressing these emotions, we sort of have this two-faced personality where on the outside many of us may appear happy and well-rounded, but on the inside we're living quiet lives of desperation, where we're not living the best life, where, or to put it another way, we're allowing these negative emotions to get the best of us. And it reduces our quality of life and really blunts us from realizing our true potential and achieving the goals and desires and dreams that we would like to achieve because we're letting these negative emotions block the positive energy that we all have to improve our lives for the better. So ultimately, then, what is it that we can do? What is it that we can do to overcome the shadow, overcome these negative emotions so that we can get and reach our goal, which is just to be happier, healthier, and more well rounded individuals? And that all starts, as I said before, which is that we have to face the shadow head on. And as Carl Jung says, everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. And if an inferiority is conscious, one always has a chance to correct it. So what we need to start doing then, and there's a psychological term for this called metacognition, where we have to start thinking about how we're thinking. And more specifically, then, we have to become much more aware of the fact that we have this shadow and that it is always going to be there. It's something that we can't ignore and repress. We have negative emotions, all of us have them, but these negative emotions serve a purpose because with every reaction, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So that whenever there's sadness, the opposite reaction is happiness. For fear, there is courage. For loneliness, there is love and abundance and relationship. For anxiety, there is peace. So for every reaction, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Without negativity, we can't appreciate the positive emotions that make our lives better. So ultimately, then we have to shed light on these negative emotions that all of us experience. And we have to face it head on. And we have to really begin thinking about how we think and become much more self aware and conscious of these negative emotions so we can start making new choices and decisions towards a much more positive way of thinking and a much more abundant life. And when we start modifying our behaviors, and this is something that we all have the ability to do because of something called the part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex, which is the analytical part of the brain, where we can start to reason and think about how we're thinking and start to make new choices and decisions. That's an incredibly powerful skill that if we can learn to harness, can drastically improve our lives for the better and help us achieve our goals and live happier lives. So there's a book by David R. Hawkins called Letting Go, The Pathway to Surrender. It's really a great book. And there's a quote from the book that I think really lends very well to this lecture as to what we're discussing with the shadow, where he says, letting go involves being aware of a feeling, letting it come up, staying with it, and letting it run its course without wanting to make it different or do anything about it. It means simply to let the feeling be there and to focus on letting out the energy behind it. The first step is to allow yourself to have the feeling without resisting it, venting it, fearing it, condemning it, or moralizing it. It means to drop judgment and to see that it is just a feeling. The technique is to be with the feeling and surrender all efforts to modify it in any way. Let go of wanting to resist the feeling. It is resistance that keeps the feeling going. When you give up resisting or trying to modify the feeling, it will shift to the next feeling and be accompanied by a lighter sensation. A feeling that is not resisted will disappear as the energy behind it dissipates. So whatever negative emotion we're experiencing, let's say, for example, fear, it could be fear of anything, fear of flying, fear of public speaking, what have you. The temptation that many of us fall for is that we try to repress these emotions or try to force it consciously to change or to get rid of these emotions. But that is actually a mistake because by trying to ignore it or trying to force an outcome and getting rid of these emotions, it actually gives them more energy when we try to resist it. So as Hawkins says, by letting go and just accepting that we are experiencing these emotions, we give those negative emotions less energy. And when that happens, then no longer do these emotions hold us at bay, and it's much easier to overcome them. And when we overcome these emotions, as Hawkins says, we feel lighter, we feel more refreshed. We don't have this weight that is bearing down our shoulders as a result of these negative emotions. And the problem, however, for many of us is that this is a very difficult thing to do, to face this shadow or these negative emotions, because we try to stay distracted. It's very difficult for us just to sit down for 5 minutes alone in silence because it's very uncomfortable because we end up facing the shadow and these negative emotions. So we stay addicted to our cell phones and social media and Netflix and YouTube. Not to knock YouTube because I'm obviously making this lecture that's being posted on YouTube, but the point is that we become addicted to content that doesn't serve our self-interest, and we become addicted or we stay addicted to these iPhones and social media devices as a way to distract us from overcoming and facing the shadow and these negative emotions. And this is something that is important for us to really think about, which is that we need to really just face this shadow head on, to face these negative emotions, and to put away the technology for a period of time, and to really sit down in silence and face and overcome the negative emotions that are causing so much havoc in our lives. And this takes courage. This takes time and discipline. But by facing whatever it is that is ailing us, it really empowers us to overcome these self-limiting beliefs and these negative emotions. And that when we get in the habit of overcoming and overcoming and overcoming, eventually we reach a point where positive emotions just naturally begin to emerge within our lives and in our minds, and we change our perceptions and belief about ourselves and the world around us. And once that happens, that's when the magic happens. That's when new experiences and opportunities occur. And that's when we're no longer being held at bay by our negative emotions and the shadow. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you can watch all my lectures and hit that like button as well. And I'll see you next class. Take care.